Boom, boom.
Okay, welcome to Hopeifiers. I am the acapellist. I am with brother Scott Sweetman. We are here to, I hope, elevate your hope at the end of the night. Take your number right now. What is your hope meter number between 0 and 100? Whatever that number is, mark it down, and then when we're done, go back and revisit. If we haven't given you a 5-point bump, 5-point bump in your hope, what are we going to do, Scott? I don't know.
We're going
Buy
to
you a coffee.
refund the money they pay for our show.
Full
Refund it.
refund with a smile on our
Absolutely.
face.
No questions asked. But quite honestly, you know what? I confess, and I was just talking about this, that my hope goes up when we do this show. After the show, I always like 10 points, 20 points sometimes. Just being hopeful, talking about it. How about you?
Same thing. And you know what? In a similar way, when you are of value to somebody else, what happens to you? How does that work? How does that resonate in your body, right? You feel that, right?
Yeah,
Like
absolutely.
this morning, I had a very unusual phone call. I had this, she sounds like a younger woman. And she said, oh, I've been sick, and I'm not going to be at court at 10:30. And so she was telling me about, like, she's been sick and now she's in school, and she's not going to be able to make it for court at 10:30. And I'm saying, thank you for sharing that. I'm not the right person. However, so it sounds like you're supposed to be in court. You're not going to be able to make it in court. You have to advise somebody of that. Is that correct? And she said yes. And I said, okay, I'm not the right person, but how about I try and find out the right person, and then I'll send you a text with the right person to call. And she said, thank you. So I called Adonis with a victim services unit. She would know, right? So I
Yes,
called
absolutely.
Adonis and said, hey, and she looked up at the court docket and said, oh, yeah, she's with the Lethbridge Police Victim Services Unit. Okay, that's good. They know she's not going to go to court. And I said, no, should we get her to? No, I'll look after it. So boom, done. So took a phone call, but I felt really good that I was to be of some value to this person, which I'll never probably talk to her again. But that was nice. I don't know
It
why
was
she called me.
beautiful.
I don't know why she called me in the first place, but that's okay.
Serendipity.
Serendipity.
Al, I just heard from Jesse. Can you move us out a bit? He says you're cut off your head. They're looking at you like you've been segmented,
Oh,
or expand us out to the format we usually use. I don't know.
okay. Hang on a second. Juke.
Oh, there we go.
Like
Maybe.
that.
Oh, no, you're still cut off now to me too. I
Oh,
see
yeah,
what he's
but
talking about. I think your camera. Maybe you've gotten taller overnight.
that must be it. Hang on
Yeah,
a
or
second.
you. Yeah.
All right, hang
Uh,
on. There we go. Further away, I'm good. This is like this little red thing is like wrapped around me. It's sort of
nice.
like a cape, except it's not attached here.
Wow, a cape. I'm envious, man.
Hey,
I
hang on.
remember in university, for some reason, there was some crazy thing at the university, and I had a cape on. I was striding around with this cape, and I thought, hey, this is kind of a cool fashion accessory. I wonder why we ever gave up capes. Alas.
Okay, so you're suggesting we get matching Hopeifiers capes for
Yes, yes. That will bring our hope level up 30 points, maybe more. Maybe more.
skipping down the sidewalk with our Hopeifier capes.
Ta-da! Then we'll have to get a theme song. Da-na-na-na-na-na-na-na-na-na-na. Just prowl Lethbridge, sharing hope with everyone we meet. I'm
I
in.
love it.
Let's go
By the way, I
tomorrow.
do love your background too. The whole earth around you with all the points of light, billion points of light, and you're one of them. I'm one of them. Our viewers are one of them. That's a beautiful thing. That's a beautiful thing.
The story behind it is I panicked. I had another one chosen that was more spring-like, but it had a sun reflection, and when I put it up, it kind of put a halo around me, and
Oh,
it was like, yeah, I was like, oh no no no, and I'm like, no, that's not so cool, because
you
yeah,
thought that might be just a little bit excessive, is what you're suggesting.
yeah, I might have gotten the megalomaniac title instead of you,
Oh,
and
what could
so
have happened?
you've got that in our team, so I'm the
Yeah,
sidekick here. No halos for me. Yeah, my cape has to be shorter too, right? You get the long cape.
the
I
long
get the
cape is
shorter
right.
one. Yeah, yeah. I don't know if I could get used to being called Hope Boy, but I make you Hope Man. But whatever. Okay, we got to get serious now.
Yes, we have an
Back
actual
here.
agenda. You've like put together a program. This is serious broadcasting here, Scott Sweetman. We want to
Yeah,
provide value to people. So enough of the jokey. Let's get to the
yeah.
program.
Let's get to, well, and it's good to joke
It
because
is.
that's one of the things. Tonight we're talking about grief and specifically eco grief because we got off on this topic talking about children and the anxiety and some of the mental stressors that children can suffer. And over the last 10 or 15 years, stress and anxiety over the environment has been moving steadily up the things that young people identify as very worrying to them, or that psychologists or people in mental health have been noticing in our young people. And so that got us on this topic, of course, as you know, and then we talked about what it meant. And people who watch the show knows how it works. You and I just find something that's like, whoa, that's we didn't know about that, and we go and find out about it, and we share that with our viewers and each other, and hopefully, like we were talking about just at the beginning, our hope goes up, and we hope that is shared with our viewers. And if it's not, you get a full money back guarantee. So
Exactly.
yeah. And you know what they say about advice being worth exactly what you pay for. So
Exactly.
yeah. So our viewers are well covered in that value equation. So grief. Now I'm going to start off with a great quote from Francis Weller, and it's: grief is not a problem to be solved, not a condition to be medicated, but a deep encounter with an essential experience of being human.
A deep encounter of an essential experience of being human. Ooh,
Yeah,
that's a good one. That's nice.
yeah. And I
I like
really
that.
like another person that I was looking at when I was researching this, and I was just really blown away by it, is they said that grief is not something you have, it's something you experience.
Mhm.
And when you really think about that, it ties in with this quote. And it's not, grief is not something to be solved or medicated, or it's not a condition that you have. It really is something that you experience.
Right. And
And
that's something we'll all experience. There's no way for us not to experience that, right? So,
absolutely. Yeah. And people who don't experience grief of any kind truly have a serious mental condition. And those people are usually well identified in their younger ages, and usually are under the care of a mental health professional quite early. Because if you don't have emotions like that, then you need help, right? And so if you're experiencing grief, the positive side of that, the Hopeifiers are always looking on the positive side, is that you're normal, you're human, you're like the rest of us. You get sad about things that worry you, and you worry, and that's quite normal. So tonight's show is going to be primarily looking at eco grief, but in researching it, I kept bumping up to grief is grief, and it's a feeling that is shared through all cultures, all humanity, past, present, and certainly future. And it's part of our experience, like the quote said. It's essential to being human. So if you
okay, so
feel grief, sorry.
I'm just going to interject. Is grief? You have a. I'm sure you're going to get to a definition, but basically, it's kind of the the worry about what will be lost, or the regret for what has been lost, something that you love that has been lost or you may lose. Would you think that's a sufficient definition of grief?
Absolutely. That's a great way to sum up the 30 or 40 different definitions I read. Some of them are really esoteric and really profound, and then some of them are really simple, but you basically hit it right on the nose. It's either for something you've lost or that you're concerned about losing in the future. And that can be anything. And
Sure.
sometimes it's internally driven, like grief, the sense of impending death is something that many of us feel as we get older at some point. And then often many people, after they experience that in later midlife, as they get older. I know that my grandfather, when he was in his 90s, he said, yeah, I've seen enough, done enough. I'm not waiting to die, but when I die, it'll be an interesting journey to see what comes next. He wasn't scared of it anymore. He didn't grieve over it. You know,
Like the
and
Johnny Cash song, "Satisfied Mind." I'll die with a satisfied mind. Yeah,
yeah,
nice.
and
Because yeah,
Johnny Cash, I love him, and you know, he did some really great stuff at the end of his life that dealt with some of the grief that he experienced, in the sense of loss that he experienced throughout his career and personal life, and great stuff there.
and
But
still, as in his 80s, right? He's like, obviously his health is failing, and he's in a chair. He can't really stand up, but he's there, and he's still creating music and sharing his voice. I thought that was like lovely that he was still doing that. Just right to the end,
absolutely.
doing what he loved to do. Right. So, yeah.
Well, and I think that ultimately we can start with the end of the show at the beginning. If you're experiencing grief, it's really important to remember that it's not something that's happened to you. It's not something that you need to be cured of.
Right.
Grief is something that you're experiencing, and it will pass. If you need help with it passing, there's lots of ways, and we'll talk about some of them on the show tonight. And there's lots of health professionals that can help you deal with that. But just feeling grief isn't a mental illness. It's not in any way abnormal. And it's actually a healthy part of human life. And it's quite beautiful in its own way. And, you know, some people may say being sad is never beautiful, but I think part of growing and maturing and getting to that point that we always talk about, it being happy with yourself, is realizing that loss is part of living, and you know, that sense that we all feel.
And it's part of a way that the person is still connected with what the love that they have lost or maybe losing, right? That, it's still, that's how they're
Absolutely.
still maintaining that connection, right? So if it was something
Great
that was
point.
lost and it didn't matter to you, there would be no grief, right? You just, oh, well, let's move on.
Yeah, and so often grief has connections to love, and you know, that that has its own dimension. What we're talking about particularly tonight is echo grief. And you know, we talked about it last show, but when we were younger, you mentioned that it wasn't really something that you even considered. It really, beyond the farming experience of my youth, wasn't something that I considered either. But you know, with the media that youth or young people are exposed to today, you know, minute by minute news cycles, and you know, by the second, news from around the world is just pumped into everyone, and really graphic, high resolution images, and some of the language. And I was looking at one psychologist, and she was examining the language used for environmental concerns, and you know, red hot, critical, you know, all of these really negative loaded words were used to describe climate change and environmental conditions and disasters around the world. Uh, when you listen, when you think of the news broadcasts that you see now on environmental conditions, what pops into your head in terms of the language used?
You know what? I have to admit that I'm probably not a very good citizen in this regard because I don't watch any news, like zero, zip, nothing. And why is because it's just too harmful, like it too
Mhm.
toxic. I don't want it in me or on me. Um, and I don't think that I'm ever going to really run into something that somebody in my travels, you as an example, won't alert me to, right? So I feel very confident in that. So other than focusing on the things that I know that I can do that will help, right? And what are the big things? Travel is a huge part of our environmental impact, right? Our footprint that way. What we our consumption, what we eat makes a big difference. The environmental footprint on eating beef, as an example, versus eating a plant-based, huge difference. It's kind of like, I'm going to make up these numbers, but it's going to be close. 1 pound of beef requires 5,000 gallons of water to produce.
Yeah.
1 pound of carrots is like 8 gallons. It's a huge difference, right? And so the impact on that, and the impact on the um, the air pollution from the toxic feed, not toxic, the concentrated feedlots. That's what I'm trying to concentrated. That is certainly an issue that impacts as well, right? So environmental impacts. If you look at it, it's like what you eat and how much you travel. And when it's travel, it's vehicles, it's air as well. But those are like number one and number two, right? So that we can make a
Absolutely.
difference. Recycling is on there too, right? Recycling is like number three, right? So I guess in those three domains, I am by no means perfect, but certainly am aware and trying to be, respectful to the earth with my practices and those things. Other than that, I don't watch the scientists, and I like, it's beyond my scope that I can do anything about. So if I can't do anything about it, I'm going to focus on only those things I can. And that's what's within my circle of influence, right? Recycling, choosing foods that make sense in terms of the environmental impacts of them, and perhaps you want to consider as well the health, your personal health as well, what that means. So that, and then your travel, what you travel, those are really the three things as individuals, the big things we can do environmental wise. Is that correct? Is that your understanding of the research, Scott? That's
Oh,
mine.
absolutely. And you've skipped ahead, and that's one of the main solutions, if you will. And I said it wasn't a problem, but then I just used the word solution. But in dealing with grief or eco grief, one of the things that the experts say that you need to do is you need to find things that you can do
Hmm.
in a personal way to affect the negative impact we have on the environment. And I guess that's from taking it from the 10,000-foot level of climate change, world ending sort of situation, to exactly what you said. What can I do as a little person in this little space to lower my footprint and make a difference at my level? And the experts all say that that's part of dealing with eco grief.
Hey, and you know what else? One thing that I missed too is more and more like plant trees, right? Plant trees, plant crops, crop diversification, that kind of thing.
Mhm.
Each of those steps sequesters carbon, makes our atmosphere a better place, right? That's my understanding. It
Absolutely.
reduces that load on our atmosphere, right? So,
I was really stricken when I was in Japan, and there was a garbage strike. And strikes are not common in Japan. Maybe it was only one of two when I was there, and it was in the city of Nagoya. It's 2.5 million people. I think they're up to almost 3 million now. But garbage pickup stopped for 2 weeks,
whoo,
and it was summer.
oh,
And Japan is a very clean country compared to many countries I've been in, including Canada. And people go out and clean up all around them and city streets. They don't think it's somebody else's deal. They all, generally people pitch in and are really clean. And recycling is, you have like 9 or 11 different bins you have to separate things into, where what we have 3 or 4, like really clean. But when
can
the
I
system
interject one
broke,
thing?
yeah,
You told me about that show, Old Enough, on Netflix. I've been watching it, and then that you get little vignettes of Japanese culture and these little people who want so much to be a big person doing an errand and pleasing their parents. It is such a sweet show, but about the cleanliness, everyone that they show in these different communities. I mean, they're all very, very like pleasant, well kept. It looks like a very nice, a beautiful country. It looks like the people, it looks like a very, they really try to be peaceful and caring people, is what it appears to be.
absolutely. Certainly after the war, there was a concerted effort by the Japanese population to do things differently and to reorganize their society in a more positive way. And then there was negative things as well. But you're right. When I was there, the things that you see in that show are true. And it's in the big cities, it's in the country. People care, and they really individually work and collectively work to keep things clean and to recycle, because they have an over packaging problem in Japan. So everything is as close to perfect as possible. So if you buy cookies, each individual cookie will be wrapped, and then a group of 5 cookies will be wrapped together, and then those will be in a container, which is then wrapped by a box, which is then wrapped by wrapping paper, which the clerk at the store will then wrap in another parcel, which they put in a bag with your other quadruple or octagonally wrapped items. It's cultural, and they're absolutely aware of the problem, and they're trying to deal with it. But when the garbage stopped getting picked up, the sheer amount of stuff was mind-boggling. Not to mention the smell,
Mm,
but just like, for me, it was like a horror movie. Like,
mm.
because of course Japan is an island, there is no landfills really for this stuff to go. It goes into the ocean. If they can't incinerate it or recycle it, that's where it goes, in the ocean. And Japan as a country gets a lot of their protein and plant material in terms of seaweed and different types of uh, sea aquatic vegetation. And all of this garbage, it would be like taking household garbage and spreading it all over your crops here. And I know that we recycle manure as fertilizer and things, but I'm talking about like all of the rubbish. So and we lived on a port, so we could see these garbage boats going out and to dump this stuff in the ocean.
So,
And
like, wait a minute, all of the garbage from Japan gets like out on a boat and dumped in the ocean?
no, they like I said, they have incredibly stringent
Recycling
recycling
now,
practices.
yeah, yeah,
But
okay,
you can imagine, any island has a problem. Where do you
sure,
put
sure.
garbage? Like, if you've taken a trip down to Lethbridge's landfill, and hats off to the municipal government that organizes that. Where I grew up, going down to the dump was kind of fun because it was this small little hole in the ground, and we were farming community, so most everything got reused. Stuff never got thrown out. Everyone was a hoarder basically. And so you just go down to see if there's anything cool or interesting in the garbage dump, and it didn't really smell bad, and there really wasn't that much in it. But if you go down to the Lethbridge landfill, a small little city like ours, you walk away gobsmacked at just that filth that we generate, right? So you can imagine being on a little island where, what do you do with it? You burn it, then you've got air pollution, and that was in the past, that was tried. But of course, that now we know that it adds toxic stuff to the air. A lot of the buildings in the bigger cities will have this black crud on it that's air pollution from, as you said, vehicles. Although public transport is huge in big cities in Japan, private ownership of vehicles, you have to pay big money for a parking space. You can't own a vehicle unless you can prove that you have a parking space reserved in.
Hey, I don't know if we are. I guess we are live still.
Oh, there
Oh,
we go. We're back. Okay.
okay, there we go. Yeah, sorry.
Sorry.
You said about
Yeah.
parking spaces, you have to make sure
Yeah.
you have a
So,
parking space.
as a society and a culture, they do a lot. I would say more than we do by far, to deal with the situation, because there is nowhere for the garbage to go. And as I said, because they get a lot of their food from the ocean, they're pretty cognizant of the fact that their rubbish is going where their food comes from.
Definitely.
But as a kid from the prairies, I was really blown away by the amount of garbage generated. And here, because our population is so much lower, we don't see all the garbage, right?
Right.
Most people don't even nowadays go down to the dump. They just put it out and it's taken away, and they don't even. If you want an education and you really want to deal with, get an awakening of some of our environmental problems, go down to the dump, and you'll see really quickly, without any way to hide from it, what
Yeah.
what our lifestyles produce. So
Yeah.
yeah, that's a big deal. But getting
So
back
then
to our.
I see you're saying so Japanese really, really good with environmental things generally and that kind of thing. But packaging, it's kind of a cultural kind of a residual that they kind of have to address and overcome. I mean, similar way we have kind of, we always, this way it's always been done. You know what? It might be worth trying something different every once in a while, right? And maybe we find something that even works better. So
Yeah, and I think we're going through that process too. My uncle, who raised cattle and raised elk, and has been in that business for lots of years. He was part of a group that researched how other countries were dealing with the waste and the gas and things produced by large industrial cattle farms and meat production like we have here. So it's not like no one cares. That even the people in the industry care and are definitely trying to find solutions. In the same way that I think most countries do genuinely have a concern about the waste and garbage we're producing. And young people in Japan are supporting companies that don't overpackage, companies that have built-in recycling programs where they take back the packaging and they recycle it, put new product in it, and return it to you.
Hmm.
And so that's definitely, and I didn't mean only young people, obviously,
No,
but
no, no, no.
you,
Yeah.
you know what I mean, that it's changing in the same way here that we're changing. I grew up on a ranch. We produced beef, and I certainly want to see less use of steroids, less industrial farming. It certainly higher quality beef produced more environmentally friendly, more clean, if you will, in terms of steroid and growth hormone use, etc. And I support beef production. I grew up in it. I eat meat, and I think generally people are trying to be more responsible. I haven't met a lot of people that are like, "Nah, who cares? Let's just pollute everything up." But one of the big things that everyone says, exactly as you pointed out, if you're feeling a lot of stress, if your young people are feeling a lot of stress about the environment, look at things that they can do or you can do with them to improve your contribution to the problem. Did I say that right? Yeah.
Yeah.
To make
Or
it
your
better.
contribution to the solution, not to the
Yeah.
problem. Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
Well, to lower your contribution to the problem, increase your contribution to the
Change
solution.
the dial from here to maybe here. Just a little
Yeah.
bit, you make
Yeah.
it a little bit better, right? So, yeah.
Exactly. A little bit less packaging, a little bit less consumption, making some choices when you buy things, looking at, do we need to encourage companies to bring in produce from halfway around the world that have to be flown in and refrigerated and sprayed with all sorts of chemicals and coated, and like as consumers, and I'm guilty, I'm not pointing fingers here, but is that what we really want? And making a choice about that is one way to help deal with grief. In the same way that other types of grief, if you can find ways to contribute to, for example, and it's one of the things that I suffer from after going through the whole coma thing and almost dying, is I'm scared of death. And I'm scared of the process of getting old and dying. And what I can do about that, one of the immediate things is try and live better. Because if the time I have, or we all have, is healthier, happier, more full of hope. We spend more time with the people we love. We actually live our life, make the time we have quality, then the time we have seems better spent. So,
Preach it,
quality over
brother
quantity.
Sweetman.
Yeah.
Preach it, brother Sweetman. Nice.
Yeah. And it goes back to eco grief, and especially young people because they really like to do stuff, right?
Yep.
And
But
there's
you're right.
lots of opportunities.
Yeah, so basically your point is eco grief is a real thing. You if you watch anything about the media, you could be scared in a big hurry about how, how horrible things are for us and the next generation and the next generation. And so really what can you do? The things that you can do. What are the things you can do? Look at what you can eat different that might be more friendly for the environment. Look what you can travel different that would be more friendly for the environment.
Mhm.
Recycle as much as you can, or reduce, reuse, recycle, all those type steps. Those are the things that you can do. Stay within there. Be happy with what your contribution can be. Is that kind of our point
Perfect.
there, Scott?
Absolutely. And I think that, that we've really honed in on one of the key things that you can do if you or people you love and care about, or if you notice, because young people, especially that if they're still in the school system, they really can't get away from exposure to the negative news and information about climate change and environmental issues. It's part of the curriculum.
Sorry, I
It's
was just thinking about that. Yeah, my advice about I don't watch the news. Nothing. If you're going to school and you get studied, you have to get tested on what current events are. That's obviously not a very successful strategy.
Yeah, you're going to get email tomorrow from teachers saying, yeah, Johnny was in my class and said he listens to Alan, who said he doesn't have to listen to this stuff. So yeah, so and that's part of why young people and children are developing eco grief is because we think it's really important, and I agree, to make people aware of this as young as possible so they can make life choices and learn. You and I, when we were young, were probably really bad for the environment just because we didn't know any better. It wasn't really a choice; it was just ignorance, right?
Exactly. When
Uh, um,
gasoline was like under $1 a gallon, hallelujah. Didn't matter if your car got 10 miles to the gallon, you'd put a schwack of fuel through that puppy. And that was even before unleaded. That was leaded fuel. So,
Yeah, I won a car when I was 16, and it was gas and propane powered.
oh,
And at that time, the technology was not really worked out on the propane side of it. But yeah, people thought, why? Like, what's why do you need this? And it's like, well, my defense was I won it, I didn't buy it, so
yes.
it
So
was it was
tell me
cool.
more. How did you win this car?
Um, it was a draw. One of something really crazy is my dad also won a car when he was 16, and I won a car when I was 16. So
Wow. Isn't that
yeah,
something, eh?
but neither of my daughters won a car when they were 16. Darn it.
No.
But
Well,
yeah.
they got you for a dad though, so they won that lottery, right?
So
So
they're like driving. Oh, thanks, Al. They're like driving my old beat up pickup truck. But yeah, yeah. No, it was a Thunderbird coupe. It was a big land yacht. It was
whew,
beautiful white. Yeah, it was sweet, and it
wow.
had this dual um, system that was propane or gas. Gas worked great. Propane depended on the weather and the phase of the moon and all kinds of things. But it was an attempt, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
So I guess I brought that up because we've been working on trying to make things better for a long time,
We
right?
have.
As a society, it's not
Exactly.
it's not like they would have you believe that we were all sort of Neanderthals and like, oh, climate matters.
Yeah.
We've been aware of this for a long time.
Yeah.
And when I said you and I as kids were ignorant of it, it's just because it wasn't. Yes, people working on it, but it wasn't us out in the farm or.
You and I are having a chat about Greta Thunberg. Is that her name? Greta
Yep,
Thunberg. The
yeah, I
other day,
think so.
what she's like 11 or 12 or something like that. Like when I was 11 or 12, like it would be like, Mom, when's supper? Like that's all I would know. Like like it just how I would never know about climate or whatever. What is there something I can drive? Can I press a throttle somewhere? That's kind of the things that I would be looking to do.
Yeah,
So, okay,
but
Scott, we got to wrap her up, buddy, for
yeah.
next
So
week. Oh, no,
well,
there's more. I'm sorry.
yeah, I need to tell you, I need to share this because I think it's important. So,
Okay,
the University of Calgary does a lot of research on eco grief. Just search University of Calgary eco grief; it'll come up.
cool.
I really wanted to share lamenting with you all. So, we've got just a tiny bit of time. So,
Sure.
the 10 steps to personal resilience and empowerment in a chaotic climate is something I found on something called goodgriefnetwork.org.
Okay.
And there's information on there. They do have a paid course that I know nothing about, but they offer a 10-step program that's online and you can be part of it if you're suffering from grief. But they do publish the 10 steps they recommend, and they're quite similar to the things that I found throughout my research. So I'm going to share them and take away from them what you will, but we've talked about some of them. Number one is to accept the severity of the predicament, right? So,
Mhm.
yep, I think we all agree that we certainly aren't doing the environment a lot of favors. We can
Mhm.
argue about the severity or whether it's a cycle or whether we're inducing it, but I don't think that anyone can really argue that we have no impact on the environment, right? Number two, practice being with uncertainty. And this comes across a lot of the grief, mental health material that I read, is that being uncertain, like you said, grief is about either loss, which you've experienced, or thinking about or worrying about loss, which is a type
Loss
of
to come.
uncertainty, right?
Yeah, loss to come. Sure. Yeah.
Right. Yeah, loss to
It's
come.
about
That's
losses
exactly
to
right.
happen or loss to come, either way, right? So yeah.
Right. And so they're saying that you have to sort of practice being uncertain and
Mhm.
accepting the fact that you can't always know for sure the outcome. Just like I don't know when I'm going to die. Could be an hour from now, might be 40 years from now. Who knows?
Mhm.
I just have to accept that that's the reality we all live under and kind of be okay with that. So that's
Mhm.
number two. Number three, honor your mortality and the mortality of all. I love that sentence, the
Mm.
mortality of all, and that kind of ties into the Japanese idea of wabi sabi, that everything is impermanent, and the change and transition, the decay, is part of the beauty of existence and
Right.
life.
Right.
And right,
Part of a fulsome experience of life, right? This is good. This is part of that we're all going to experience, and it's just kind of part of the journey that we're on. That this is a part of it. That's just how it works. So yeah,
we all be food for worms, right?
yeah,
Something like that, Shakespeare said. Do inner work, and by this they're talking about really think about how you can feel better. Incorporate the things, being with uncertainty, understand the morality of all, or mortality of all, morality, Freudian slip, mortality of all, and like you said, do what you can do in the situation and this and the conditions you find yourself to make whatever you're grieving about better, right? If it's the loss, I'm thinking about the most recent grief I've encountered personally was losing one of my canine friends. And
Mm.
I've got one of my dear canine friends now, members of my family, that's going through the process of death, and she's got terminal cancer. She's hung on for a year longer than the vet thought she would hang on, and CBD oil surprisingly has helped her a lot.
Mm.
But just just being aware of that and accepting it and being present with her while she's with us has helped deal with that grief, right? And
Mhm.
so that ties into the next one, which is develop an awareness of your own bias and perception. And I think that's really important because when you were talking about food and consumption and its effect on the environment, I, I'm never going to be a vegan. Can't help it. I like animal protein. I like its taste. I like its smell. No, I don't like that another life has to be given for it, but I'm willing to accept that, right? And that's a bias I have, and I need to be aware of that. That not everyone has that bias. And I'm
Mhm.
not angry at you because you've made the decision to take that out of your life. You're not angry at me because I haven't. We both wish for each other the best life we can have, and we're aware of our own biases in that. So we talk about it, we joke about it, we have fun with it, we poke each other, but we're aware of that bias, so it doesn't add to our grief, right?
Sure.
Okay. This is a big one, and I know in your life this is huge. Practice gratitude. Love
Yes.
this next part. Witness beauty and create connections. Wow, isn't that
Oh,
powerful?
oh, I love that. Witness
Yeah,
beauty and create connections. Oh, that's amazing. Yeah, I
yeah.
love that.
And
Yeah,
that's a great message for hope. Just that on itself, we could do a whole show about that.
we could.
Learning to witness beauty, not trying to control it, not trying to, and we're really guilty of this. Everyone carries around their phones, and when they see something beautiful, they just want to snap pictures of it. How about trying to experience it? Just
Mm.
take it in
Mhm.
and be there with that beauty and be in that moment with it and create connections in your own life and with other people and with the energy that's all around us, right? So that's
Mhm.
a big one in dealing with grief. The next one is good advice, and unfortunately it's not built into our culture. There are cultures that it's built right into their culture, and that's take breaks and rest.
Mm.
And that's not to be confused with sitting on your backside watching TV all day. That's talking about, if you're really worked up about something, just give yourself a minute. And I would refer to the previous one. If you're really worked up and need a break, find something beautiful to witness.
Mhm.
And beauty's all around us, man. As you
Mhm.
know, you
Mhm.
don't have to look far for witness or beauty. If you just close your eyes for a minute and say, when I open my eyes, I'm going to see beauty, there's a 100% chance if your mind is open and your soul is open, you're going to see that beauty when you open
Beautifully
your
said.
eyes.
Beautifully.
So,
That was beautiful right there, Scott. Beautifully said right there. Proved your
exactly.
point.
The next one I think is really important, and that's grieve the harm that you've caused. And this is something that I think is really important psychologically. Bring that pain to a personal level, because when it's out there, when I have no control over it, it's scary, right?
Okay.
When it's when you think of these big corporations polluting the environment, and climate change running amok, and all of these things, most of us think, what can I do about that? But if you bring it back to say, what did I do to hurt the environment today? And
I
what can I do to change that? Right? That's what you were talking about when you're saying,
I understand.
you know, yeah.
Coming back to
So
what contribution can I make, or what damage can I minimize, like that kind of a thing,
yeah,
right?
and grieving the harm, it's like you like to start our show with Oki,
Yeah.
and whatever your views are on colonization and that whole issue and the residential schools, it was harmful, and and grieving that is important.
Hmm.
I don't care what your position is. There were people whose lives were destroyed on all sides of that. I mean, I can find stories of missionaries whose lives were destroyed because their family sent them out to the colonies to, do these things, and they didn't want to do anything but stay home and live a comfortable life in jolly old England or wherever they were coming from. There
Hmm.
was pain all the way around there, and
Hmm.
grieving that is an important part of moving past that,
Yep.
right?
Yep. Yep.
So that's there. And the next one is relevant to their online course, but I think it's relevant in other ways, and that's show up, right?
Hmm.
And if I'm worried about the environment and it's causing me grief, I need to show up to that party. I need to be part of the solution, and maybe not just in that very localized way we were talking about. Maybe I need to set some time aside to share with other people that are concerned and grieving about the same thing.
Hmm.
And that's how I would interpret that show up. And I think that's really important in grief. A lot of the grief counseling and other mental health things that I looked at really talked about finding people that share your anxiety, share your pain, and share that grief with them. And through that, you develop those connections we talked about way back in number 6, and you
Hmm.
start to see some beauty in those connections, and it really helps with anxiety and grief.
Nice. Yeah.
And number 10, this is a big one in everything: reinvest in meaningful efforts. And a lot of times when people grieve over something, our natural tendency is to give up. And there's some beautiful poetry about how the wine isn't as sweet and the colors aren't as bright, and when someone we love dies, the world is just never ever good. And partially that's true. It's never ever the same, but we need to make a conscious effort to go back and reinvest ourselves. And obviously the people that we've lost who we love wouldn't like to see us not enjoying the time that we have left here. In the same way with the environment, when there's a big disaster and when everything looks really horrible, giving up is just going to add to the grief. You're just going to have no way to escape, and it's just going to get heavier and heavier and heavier until it crushes you mentally, maybe
Hmm.
physically. So I really am invested in reinvestment. Go back and find something meaningful that you can do, even if it's little, and it'll help.
And there's
Right?
always something you can do. Always something you
Always,
can do.
always. Amen,
All
brother.
right.
So that's where we are. I didn't get to it tonight, but look up lament. There's a lot of therapy based around lament. What lament is when there's an outpouring of your grief or your pain. It's been with us since the beginning of time. The Bible and other religious books talk a lot about lamenting. The Psalms in the Christian Bible have a lot of lament in them, and mental health professionals are prescribing a lot of lament therapy where you actually and it's music is one way,
Okay.
singing sad songs.
This sounds like a whole show. Lament sounds like
Yeah,
a whole show. Is
perfect.
that your
Let's do it.
plan? Okay.
Yeah, it's a
Next week.
date.
Next week.
Yeah.
Hey,
Okay.
thanks for joining us. Hope to see you next week, and get a Matson.
What does that mean, Al?
Oh, see you later in Blackfoot.
Cool. From the acapellas to myself, Scott